Welcome to the Spirit RX podcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. In this place, two healers come together, each walking a different path, yet bound by a common purpose. Dr. Luke, a quantum chiropractor, and Dr. Hummel, a naturopathic doctor. These two practitioners have dedicated themselves to a vital quest to unite the timeless remedies passed down through the ages with the powerful discoveries of modern medical science. For they understand what many have forgotten, that true healing honors both tradition and innovation. Should you wish to learn more of their stories, their practices, or how to walk this path with them, you will find that knowledge in the link below. And now, let the healing wisdom begin.
All right. Hello, and welcome to this edition of Spirit RX podcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. I'm Dr. Michael Hummel, naturopath, and this is Dr. Luke. He's a quantum chiropractor. This year, we're interviewing a lot of really cool people. And today we have an amazing person with us. So let's hop to that.
So why don't you introduce yourself, John, to the audience? Tell us who you are, what you do.
Okay, my name is John Ourant. I am a professional homeopath, means I do homeopathy. I'm not a physician. I help people who have chronic health conditions. And I've been practicing in Ashland, Oregon since 2005. I also teach at the Los Angeles School of Homeopathy. And I used to be an electrical engineer, so I have a science background.
That is important. Our background influences the way we look at things. Tell us about homeopathy is a niche thing in today's world. Tell us about your aha moment or how you came to become involved with homeopathy to the level that you are now.
So my aha moment was when I discovered that it wasn't placebo effect. Many years ago in the mid 90s, I would always get several colds, sore throats every winter. I used to have frequent headaches, and I wasn't happy with popping pills. Didn't work that great anyhow. Somebody recommended homeopathy, someone I trusted. So I started trying it. I didn't know anything about it at all, but I started looking into it, and then I went, oh, this is supposed to be placebo effect. And then my thought was, that's great, right? If I can trick myself into making this headache go away, that's better than taking this pharmaceutical. That's wonderful. So that's what I thought I was doing. But then I started to experience or experiment with homeopathy, and I wasn't having great success in the sense of getting better, but the remedies were making me different. Like my headache would go from a sharp headache to a throbbing headache. Then it would go back. And there are other things that happened where I began to say, okay, this is not what I expect from placebo. So I began to experiment more, began to study more, and eventually I had to come to the conclusion, oh, this is doing something. There's action here. And that caused me to go, oh, I thought I was the smart science guy. I thought those other people over there, they didn't know what they were really talking about. And then I realized I had it backwards. I didn't know what I was talking about, and those people were the smart ones. And it wasn't really an aha moment. It was a deeply humbling, oh damn moment when, oh, the way I thought the world worked is not the way it works. And when I thought I was smart, I wasn't. So that really drove me to really want to understand more about homeopathy. I started with a correspondence course. I moved into in person. And at some point along the way, I went, oh, I want to do this.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you went into it with a little bit of an open mind, but more of the nocebo effect. And
Yeah.
instead, like you jumped over that. You overcame that obstacle, which is pretty cool.
It's Occam's razor at some point. You realize that, oh, I have so many assumptions propping up my understanding of what happened that it's no. It just doesn't float.
So I just want to mention here that you're a very humble person. And I think maybe your introduction came across a little bit like this guy, he's just a homeopath. Let me tell you something. John has a deep understanding of homeopathy. I've only met one other person in my life that has your level of understanding. And I can say that just from our conversations about homeopathy in the past, because I've talked to a lot of homeopaths. I've had people who did residencies in homeopathy, and that's all they did, seeing hundreds of patients. And you can tell your depth of study, your depth of understanding, and your depth of experience over the years. So I just want to emphasize that as well as being a teacher at a homeopathic college. So imagine you're stuck in an elevator with a curious but skeptical scientist, maybe a former you, like, or maybe
Mhm.
still you in some ways. And you have 1 minute to explain the two foundational principles of homeopathy: light cures and the law of minimum dose before the doors open. Let's hear your
So
pitch.
60 seconds, go.
60 seconds. And then
Okay,
go
wait,
for
I'm gonna pause the timer for just a second
it.
because
That's a good decision.
there is no law of minimum dose.
Oh,
That is not correct, but I'll come back to that. It's very difficult to do. I can do it, right? Homeopathy is a natural, holistic therapeutic modality. It works by stimulating an organism to heal itself using microdoses of a substance that fits the patient in a holistic way, taking into account all their symptoms, as well as a collection of sensitivities that they experience, including both their physical and mental state. It was under 30 seconds, but I packed a
pretty
lot in
good.
there. There's this
Yeah.
idea that you're going to stimulate self-healing and you're going to use microdoses, which means you're not doing a direct intervention like you usually do in conventional medicine. It is not always appropriate to do that, but that's what homeopathy is. It also means it's holistic, which means you're not doing this for that treatment, which is what we're used to. I have a headache. I want to take this thing because I have a headache. No, I need a collection of symptoms. I might have to include mental symptoms, which we're not used to. We think that's an extra thing. And so I have to look at it holistically. So there's a lot in there, and it's getting over that, taking medicine X for symptom Y is so hardwired into the way we see things in healthcare. You can't get over that in 30 seconds or 60 seconds, really. It just like it just hits a wall in people's understanding. Like, wait, what?
I get that. That was really hard, even as a naturopath. Like going through school, we were learning all these really incredible modalities, like, for example, Chinese medicine, right? And homeopathy. But we were looking at it through this Western lens. So we're still seeing it, even though we dived in a little deeper, we're still seeing it from that symptom treatment approach. And so expand a little bit on what you were talking about with the law of minimums, and then we'll go from there. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so the goal is to do as little as possible, right? The goal is minimum dose is it's sometimes people reframe that as what's called the Arndt-Schultz rule, which says that small doses stimulate, moderate doses inhibit, and large doses kill, which is a thing in pharmacology actually. We got to get the dose of something right. But really in homeopathy, it's the idea of minimum dose is a combination of self-healing, because what you want to do is you want to stimulate an organism to heal itself. You don't want to step in and force something. And then also the do no harm principle. So I want to do as little as I can to stimulate the body to heal itself. So I want to use a minimum dose. I don't want to overpower and try to force the thing. You can't force healing, is at least my belief, and it's a belief in many alternative modalities. On the other hand, sometimes you need that force, right? If I'm in an emergency room, I want this for that medicine. I want to survive. That's surviving so I can heal later, as opposed to actually healing something, working with the body's ability to heal, not, oh, my body can't heal. The damage is too big. It's what conventional medicine does best, right? Which is surgical procedures in emergency rooms. It's really great to have those things.
How about this idea? So, my experiences with homeopathy have been that in the West, we have an opposite view, which is that oh, you've got high blood pressure. Here, take this drug. And we pretty much give that to everybody. So this is works for almost everybody. We're going to start there. In homeopathy, it's like we're looking at the individual, and that high blood pressure might just be one of many things that we're looking at in a composite. And then likewise, then even in taking the history, the homeopathic practitioner is going to ask a lot of weird questions that most people in America are not used to. I remember being asked, "Is my breathing better outside versus inside?" And I'm like, "What? I haven't even thought about that. Does it float or sink?" And I'm like, "What? Why are you asking me these questions when we're talking about this thing way over here?" And so could you speak to that approach, even from the get-go when you're taking the history and you're doing that detective work, to explain that to us a bit?
It's really, it comes with what it means to be holistic, or what it means to have a holistic approach, right? We often tend in our society to think holistic means we have body and mind. So I'm going to take a pharmaceutical and I'm going to go to a yoga class. And that's not holistic. It might be good for you. Holistic, right? It means that there's something going on that's above, you could say, or beyond or bigger than both the mind and the body. So the body is a whole unit and it's trying to manage in the environment that you're in as best it can. And it has, you could say it has a goal. The goal is to keep you and whole in a world that is constantly trying to change you, whether it's a bacteria that would like to set up a manufacturing facility in your body, or maybe I want to change your mind. I want you to buy my thing or vote for my candidate. I'm always trying to change you, but I want to remain whole. I want to remain me. So I'm constantly having to adapt to this environment. So the one way to look at chronic disease, actually some acute disease potentially as well, is that ability to interact with the environment is off center, it's off balance, you could say. And so what happens with that is now I become oversensitive to certain things and undersensitive to other things. You can break that down and go, oh, it's because I have a little bit of too much of this hormone or this chemical, not enough of the other. There's definitely some physiology underneath it. But in homeopathy, we're looking at what the patient is experiencing, right? Oh, I find that I'm attracted to this. I'm repulsed by that. It could be a food, it could be the weather, it could be particular mental, emotional problems. A straight up example was people that remind you of your parents. If you had a particular problem with your parents growing up, especially if you had a traumatic childhood, those things like push your buttons, right? They can really go deep in terms of creating stress in you. So those are the sort of things that homeopaths catalog. We have a process called approving where you gather that information. And so we have a lot of information. Oh, people who would do well in this remedy tend to like salty foods, or they tend to be chilly, but they like the fresh air. Or sometimes there's dream. Oh wow, these people tend to have the dreams of flying, or whatever. So there's this whole kind of collection of things that I like to describe as sensitivities or insensitivities. In some cases, you're non-reactive to stuff you ought to be reactive to, and you collect all that information, compare it to data that we have in our materia medica, as it's what it's called, and use that to find a remedy. But it doesn't jive with conventional medicine, where we only care about what is your symptom, and that's kind of it. Like what one thing. I want to know about as much as I can take in.
I love that. Yeah, it really, that makes more sense when you're trying to understand the comprehensive nature of a person, right? And then match it to that remedy that hits those. So let's talk about the potency paradox. So
Okay.
this is the kind of the fascinating and baffling part of homeopathy for a lot of people. And I think Hahnemann in the beginning didn't do it this way, and then he discovered this sort of principle and went from there. In homeopathy, the more a substance is diluted, typically the more potent it's considered. For the layperson, can you break that down a little bit for us?
So the process of making a homeopathic remedy is called potentization. So it's a potentized substance, and the short version of that is you dilute it somewhat and you shake the heck out of it, usually. It's called succussion. So it's dilution and succussion. If you just dilute it, eventually it doesn't do anything. But if you dilute a little bit, succuss it, dilute a bit of it, succuss it, it retains medicinal quality. However, the paradox comes in because it stops being a chemical quality. It becomes something else. What exactly that is, I don't know. There's a lot of ideas around it. But in order for that to work, it has to be a good match, tuning your radio, right? If you're not on the right frequency, you get noise. So, yeah, but there's a couple of things that are in there, which is you can do homeopathy without potentized remedies. You talked about Hahnemann, Samuel Hahnemann, who sort of created the word, founded homeopathy. He didn't start with potentized remedies. Mercury has a homeopathic relationship with syphilis, for example. He used to give it as treatment to people with syphilis. It actually works, except for it causes you to go insane, more or less. It damages your brain. And Hahnemann actually, before was a homeopath, he actually developed a different chemical version of mercury that was used in the treatment of syphilis that had fewer side effects. But his goal was, can I get rid of the side effects? How little can I give of this substance to somebody, have the therapeutic effect without essentially poisoning them, without giving them the toxic side effects? And because he lived right at the end of alchemy, right, in Europe in the Middle Ages, the idea of let's shake it in between these dilutions wasn't a crazy idea, right? Alchemists were always trying to transform materials. We have this idea that they were trying to make lead into gold or whatever. It's not really true. They were early chemists, right? They were, oh wow, you heat a thing, it changes. So they were busy doing that. So for Hahnemann, that was a thing. Oh, I'll try shaking this thing in between. Oh, it still has an effect, but now it's a different effect. It's
Well,
it's
tell us about, let's say I'm watching social media, and whether we're talking about sore throats or whatever, and someone recommends, oh, you need a homeopathic remedy X. So let's say Arnica, Montana, because I've got these stiff muscles. Okay, so then I go to the health food store and I see a whole section where there's a bunch of remedies there. Can I do that myself? Do I need some guidance in the potency that I need? Tell me about, like, how would you advise the average consumer who maybe knows a little bit about homeopathy, but not really a lot?
a deep topic because when you go to a store, something that's labeled homeopathic, it has to do with a manufacturing process and the way the FDA oversees that. But the actual understanding of homeopathic or homeopathy, as I use it, has to do with the process by which you determine which thing to use. So it's not a pharmaceutical-like process, it's a therapeutic process. And so the two things are actually somewhat different. But when you go to the health food store and you're standing in front of it, right, they get merged and
Right.
become the same thing, right? If you take arnica cream, that's really not potentized. It's really an herbal thing, right? There's plenty of stuff in that arnica. It's plenty of arnica in there. It's not highly potentized. So yeah, again, you don't need to have these highly potentized remedies to do homeopathy. But what I would recommend is if you don't know anything about homeopathy and you don't really want to learn, try a combination remedy. There's a bunch of things that they basically take. Okay, here are 6 common remedies for headaches. We're going to put them all together. We're going to take a shotgun approach and hopefully one of them works. Those work. They don't always work, but then again, the pharmaceuticals don't always work for you either. You can give it a try. It doesn't cost you a lot and you don't really have a side effect problem. So that's a simple way to try it out. If you're really going to do homeopathy and get a bunch of remedies, then you want to get a book and you want to read up and you want to try to figure it out. You want your kit of 30 remedies or whatever, the common ones that get used for first aid and coughs and colds. and start learning what are the indications for giving which one. And it involves some work, right? That's a problem. It's much easier to go, oh, my head hurts. Give me a pill. Okay, did it work or not? Okay, whatever. As opposed to, oh, and it's tough. We just talk about the homeopathic mom, although I did it as the dad, right? When your kid is unhappy in the middle of the night and they're not well and you're trying to pick a remedy, it's just, oh my God. Your brain is like looking in this book and, okay, what are the symptoms? And you're just like, no, I want to sleep. It's a challenge. It's not as easy to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a big, all of medicine overlaps with itself, right? So you can go into whatever field and you're going to have people that overlap in their thinking in different other fields. And so one of the things that I often use as a differentiator with homeopathy is the depth that the homeopath is going into with their patient to understand what remedy fits them best. And that's a big difference because it does take quite a bit of time.
Right.
Like I do a lot of herbalism and I use arnica, right?
Right.
And I use it, I'll have them put it over a bruised joint or like a bruise that they have or something like that, and a pretty concentrated dose topically. And there's some internal uses too. But man, you would not want to take arnica at a strong dosage internally. That is not a good decision. And so like I feel, and this is why I refer out, even with having done education in homeopathy, it takes a real deep dive into
Right.
becoming good at it and to be helping people.
One thing I want to add in there, though, is that it's much easier to do with an acute problem, right? That's a self-limiting problem because your body is trying to heal itself. If you can give it a push or a boost, that's great. When you have
Well,
a chronic problem, you're stuck. So it's much harder to do homeopathy for a chronic problem. I use the archery metaphor. The target is further away, it's smaller. It's much harder to get a remedy that's really going to work. But then if you fall down and you've twisted your ankle, you have a bruise on whatever, and you just need some arnica, I've seen it do amazing things, right? But my body already wants to heal that. It's not a chronic problem. So if I can push it in the right direction, it'll help.
so if a parent that's starting to get involved with homeopathy to use at the home level for some simple things, they come to you and say, hey, what, like a first aid kit? Like, for instance, I keep a first aid kit in my car. I actually do have some homeopathic remedies in there as part of that. But what would you recommend to someone like, hey, you might want a first aid kit, and here are some essential homeopathic elements that you might want to include?
Usually I would direct people at a pharmacy. I like Hahnemann Labs down in the Bay Area. They sell a bunch of different kits. There are other pharmacies where you can buy a kit, and here are like 30 common remedies or that you're likely to use in a home situation, self-limiting, self-care type things. And then there are various books, some small, some bigger, to help you understand how to use them. But it, there's the learning curve, and then there's a whole trial and error thing where you try it. But that's actually one of the wonderful things about homeopathy is that usually when it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. You're not having a bunch of toxic side effects to deal with. You're like, that one didn't work. Okay, let me try something else.
What might a patient expect as far as the timing on when we know if something works?
So I tell people if you don't see something significant in 3 doses, and we're talking about a acute
Yeah.
situation. So I would say if you don't see something happening within 3 doses, then that's probably not a good remedy for you to move on. One of the tricks is how often do you repeat that? So if someone fell and had a concussion, arnica is a great concussion remedy, right?
Mhm.
So I'm giving them that remedy every 5 minutes on the way to the hospital, probably, right? On the other hand, if I'm trying to help somebody and whatever, somebody has a bad sprain, I might give them the remedy Ruta once a day for 3 days to help get over that because we still have to heal that. So you're taking it once every few minutes, once every hour, once every day. Depends on how intense the situation is. One of the challenges in homeopathy is how often do you repeat a remedy? And the answer is as often as you need to. when does it stop working? Oh, the remedy's helping. Oh, now it's not helping so much anymore. Take it again. How long did that take? Depends on you, your situation. Kids need less than older people. Usually, kids have a lot more vitality. So they need less of a push to get their body to heal.
Yeah, I've noticed that even like working with younger population, I typically have much faster results in younger folks. So here's a big question, and I think that what we've been focusing on so far is physical, right?
Yeah.
Physical issues. Where does homeopathy lie with like emotional imbalances like anger, grief, and such?
It obviously it's holistic, right? It's going to work as well for emotional issues as well as physical issues, really. A lot of people have used their homeopathy. They're using their whatever, their Ignatia or
Mm,
Nature Muriaticum for people who are suffering from a grief. So there's a lot of people have their home kit, but they're also use it for mental emotional stuff. Man, if you have a thing in your first aid kit, aconite for real deep fear, it is very powerful. I've used it on people who've like gone through an accident and they're really in that wow, I almost died place. I've given that remedy and you just see it in their eyes, you just switch. Whoa.
Yeah, repeat that again in case our listeners want to cue in on that. Tell us again what that's called.
It's one of the homeopathic first aid remedies. It's called aconite.
Aconite.
Yeah. It has a
Okay.
longer name, Aconite napellus, but it's aconite, and it's usually used for fear of death. It's a shock and trauma remedy. It's oh my God. It's also used for really high fevers, but it's just sort of wow, this is intense. I might not make it. It's that feeling, and there's a aconite look in the eye that I haven't had to use it too much. Fortunately, I haven't been in a lot of that sort of intense trauma situation. But yeah, you just wow. And that's not the physical side of it purely. It's more of there's a shock element there, which is a physical physiology going on, but there's also an emotional thing. Like wow, in a chronic sense, there's always an emotional side that goes with the physical symptoms. That's what it means to be holistic. And it's like trauma gets into your being. I know, Luke, it gets into it's in your spinal.
It's in your body for sure, and your
That's
mind as
true.
well. Yeah.
I've experienced it. Yeah, it gets into your being. And by that, I mean, it's not just your mind, right? PTSD is a mental and physical, but even more than that kind of experience. And conventional medicine knows this too. We have ACE scores, which is adverse childhood events. So people that have a high ACE score are much more likely to have a whole range of conventional diagnoses of health problems when they get older. So it's like trauma, it gets into your being, and somehow homeopathy, as well as other holistic modalities, somehow unlock that. Oh, let's get that process, let's get that to move. It's not uncommon that people will come to see me with a physical problem, and then, oh wow, they had this traumatic event in their past, and it's okay, as the physical symptoms heal, stuff starts coming up for them. That's a great time to go and do some therapy or talk with your family, your friends, your clergy, whatever it is to process that stuff. And it's common that for, especially if people haven't really worked on it a lot, that the trauma will start getting processed again as they're healing from their physical symptoms.
Well, it's my understanding that while you do a few acute things, you really like to dig into chronic issues. So, can you give us some examples of like your wheelhouse, your bread and butter every day? People come to me for these kinds of chronic issues that the listener might really resonate with.
And part of that is I'm not a physician. So I have certain tools, but I don't have certain tools that a medical doctor, naturopath, chiropractor would have. I'm not going to be working with people who have any kind of urgent care situation. It's not that homeopathy is necessarily inappropriate for that, but it's definitely not. I would need to have other tools to
Right.
do that. But the kind of things that I see a lot of would be rheumatoid arthritis, food allergies, environmental sensitivities. These days, a lot of anxiety disorders, people with anxiety or panic attacks. I work a lot with kids with either an ADHD or an autism spectrum diagnosis. That covers a lot. A lot of stuff gets hidden under that umbrella, behavioral issues or sometimes issues with cognition. And yeah, a lot of autoimmune things, whatever it's just from allergies to irritable bowel syndrome. That's a pretty good list.
Yeah, let's point this out just to bring this up to the audience is that we went through a list of symptoms or
Right.
diagnoses, but each one of those diagnoses could end up with a completely different homeopathic remedy. So I just want to make sure that's understood because I think sometimes we're still looking at it through these Western eyes,
Right.
which helps people understand, are you a good fit for me? I have this diagnosis. But when they actually meet with you and you're able to dive into their history and find that remedy for them, which tell me a little bit about that process because you've talked to us about that before. Do you almost always find the right remedy on the first shot? Or like how many times can it take? Give a little bit of an understanding of that.
Yeah, well, you know the answer to that already. But
Leading
I usually,
question.
Yeah, I totally would.
yeah, I usually tell prospective patients that I do pretty well with 3 tries, and pretty well is more like 75% ish, where there's a significant improvement. When we talk about placebo. Part of my job is to figure out what is placebo and what isn't. Sometimes people will come back, yeah, I have more energy and I'm sleeping better. And I'm like, no, this remedy didn't do anything. Really, I want, if it's measurable, there should be a measurable improvement. There should be real improvement. So some measure of this remedy is really working. And it often takes me 3 tries to get there, right? So I'll give one remedy and then I'll have a follow-up appointment and I'll say, oh, it did something. But it was either a minor improvement or it was palliation, right? They took the remedy, they're better for a few days, took it again, they're better for a few days. That's not the goal. I want something to actually shift, get at the core of it. Or symptoms get moved around a little bit, meaning that, oh, wow, this is a little bit better and this is a little bit worse. Moving the sand around the sandbox. That's also not the goal. But that is sometimes clues, it's information. Oh, okay, this remedy, yeah, it worked. Which part of it worked and which part of it didn't? Okay, that's information that hopefully can help me find better remedy the next time, right? Because I know which part of my understanding of the patient
Yeah.
was on target and which was wrong.
I guess I'm hearing you say that a person that's just getting started with a practitioner of homeopathy should expect that it's going to take a little bit of time as that narrowing process occurs, and they need to have a certain amount of patience that
And it's
their
going to take
expectations.
a while to heal. If you've had a chronic problem for 30 years, it's not going to go away overnight. Even on a good remedy, it's going to take a while for that to go away, at least months. One of the aspects as to whether or not homeopathy is appropriate has to do with how functional versus how physical your pathology is. So if it's functional, the body can, if you have inflammation, the body can, the remedy is good, inflammation can be reduced, right? Or neuralgia, right? Oftentimes hormonal things can shift pretty quickly. Now, if you actually have a growth, right? If you're talking cancer, okay, how quickly can the body undo that? Can the body even undo that at some point, right? Obviously, or if you've had organs removed, you're not growing them back. What is possible? And that somewhat depends on how functional the problem is versus how structural that is. And that is, what can you expect from homeopathy? Can it do a lot? Maybe it's with a cancer patient, maybe it's complementary. It can really help, but you're going to need those other modalities, other therapies to deal with this stuff because it's going to be very difficult for your body to reverse all of that change. There's a tendency of people because you think, oh, homeopathy doesn't work, and you think it works, and you think it's magic. I'm going to take a pill and I'm just going to get better, poof. And that is very unusual, and it's especially unusual for a chronic condition.
Okay. How about this concept? Like, I remember when I was in medical school, I had one instructor that really confused the word homeopathy with home remedy. So, whenever instruction was given, she would just interchange those things together. And when some of the students would raise their hand and try to say, you're missing what homeopathy is, she didn't want to hear it. So, at some point, it was like, okay, just let that go. You can't change everybody's mind. But what are some big misconceptions about homeopathy, what it isn't, that you encounter or that you might want to share with the public?
Yeah. It is part of the problem is that homeopathy gets used on the internet often as a catch-all for a lot of alternative things. Yes, you can find some people who do homeopathy who probably also do crystals, but it's not what homeopathy is, right? Homeopathy is alternative, so it means that those of us who are doing it, a lot of us are open to or using other alternatives, but they're not all the same thing. So that's part of it is that people don't actually understand, or the name is used to cover things that are not homeopathy. And then the biggest misconception actually is what I said before. It has to do with a chemical point of view that if something is going to affect your health, it has to work the way that a chemical does it. So how can it possibly work? Because what's going on here is something other than chemical. Certainly for what I do when I'm using highly potentized substances. Yeah, that kind of goes with the biggest myth, which is, oh, this is placebo that you have to do. There is one other huge myth, though. And the huge myth is that homeopathy is unscientific and unproven, right? So people are like, okay, can you prove to me that homeopathy works? And the answer, of course, is it's proven. If someone says it's not, it's propaganda. That's not true. You can do your own, if you really want to know, hey, what's going on here, you can do it yourself. Spend some time with it. Or I can hand you a giant stack of studies. Like, look, this is not placebo. Here's potentized substances used on petri dishes and bacteria that had a different reaction. There's plenty of evidence that what is going on with homeopathy is not placebo effect, that there is something happening there. So this idea that, oh, it hasn't been proven yet, that's just propaganda. Now, you might say, oh, is there evidence that homeopathy would be a good therapeutic modality for this particular diagnosis? That, yeah, sure, that may or may not have been demonstrated, but does it work? Meaning there is a action? Yes. It's an inconvenient truth, as they say, right? People don't want to, oh, I don't want to accept that. Go, because it means that I have to change my understanding of how health works, how the world works. So we go, yeah, but have you really proven it yet? Yes, here it is. Here's a stack of studies. But those are mostly done by homeopaths. So that might be biased. Okay, let's have some non-homeopaths do those studies. And they're like, oh no, we won't do those studies because it's homeopathy, it's weird. So yeah, so this idea that it hasn't been proven yet is probably actually the biggest myth that's out there.
I think that we see that across the what would be considered alternative medicine field. We know that there are definitive biases that exist throughout medicine, and that those biases, often financial, drive some of the propaganda that's put out there. So I would really encourage people to consider homeopathy. It's profound, it's amazing. I always tell all of my patients, I tell people all the time that homeopathy is foundational, especially with chronic illnesses. But generally, it's the reason I think it's foundational is because it's so non-invasive. It's a great,
Right.
beautiful first step. As long as there's not something acute that has to be addressed right away, that's going to kill them immediately, like where they need heroic care. There is a definite, definitive nature there. But anyway, I won't go off too much on that. But is there anything, because we have to wrap this up, is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with? Like one piece of advice, one major component that you want to focus on before we wrap up here?
Yeah, it's hard to encapsulate this. For me, the biggest change of from when I look at how I thought of health, what I did 30 years ago, is really understanding natural health. What does that really mean? Oh, it means that medicine doesn't cure. The body cures itself. That's you can medicine, it can keep you alive long enough to heal later, right?
Mm.
If you're damaged beyond your body's capacity to heal, great. It's amazing we have medicine. We can replace a joint. There's all sorts of things we can do. The body is self-healing. And so for the first options we want to do, we want to take quote unquote natural approaches, which doesn't mean only using natural substances. It means doing things that stimulate your body to heal itself. Support that, right? That's nutrition, that's lifestyle related issues. It might be cleansing. You need to get some toxins out, right? All sorts of other modalities, massage, chiropractic, acupuncture, including homeopathy. You want to do those things that's going to help your body heal itself. And when you go to a physician, yeah, you may have a problem that needs to be addressed, but you want information. How am I doing? What's my level of health? And oh, if I'm going to try some new things in my life, some dietary changes, whatever, is it working? Right? Can I get information from my physician to help me make better choices about how I'm going to heal? That for me is the big thing. Whether or not homeopathy is appropriate for you or not, really just thinking of health in that way it's super important. It's profound. And that's really for me, the biggest shift from when I was younger.
Thanks for that, John. I like to say to encourage people that they are their best doctor, their best physician, their best healer, to know themselves, to rely on themselves. And then with that also comes a responsibility. You need to have a team or a toolbox at your disposal because no one doctor, physician, practitioner is going to be able to cover every single thing that's going to happen to you in your lifetime. And so don't just have the mindset that, oh, I go to this one doctor that I always go to, and then even though I'm not getting the results that I want, that's it. That's a narrow range. And I would encourage people to expand that. And so explore some of these other modalities. And I think we would both concur that homeopathy is an excellent thing to add to that toolbox that you might have as an individual. And anything else, do some research, do some interviewing, talk to some homeopaths. It can have an extremely profound, important, positive effect on people. We thank you so much, John, for your time today. We wish you all the best. And yeah, we're happy. I know we're both happy to refer people to you because you're excellent at what you do. And we just want to applaud you for your service to the world.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this podcast.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care.